Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Nahmaduhu wa nusalli ala rasulihil kareem. So, in this lesson, we are going to be discussing Al-Mu'al, a hadith which is called Mu'al, meaning it has an illah. But before we start, we're going to have to recap. So, Mustab, it's all on you. What do we have? We have, first of all, we have a hadith. A hadith is made up of what? Is correct. Sanad, which is the chain, and matan, which is the text. Okay? According to the hadith being sahih or not sahih, what categories do we have? Sahih, Hasan, and Da'if. And sahih is which hadith? What's the definition of sahih? They all have dhabt, and correct. They all have dhabt and they all have adala. And then between the ruwat, what must we have? We must have they must have what? Ittisalu sanad. They must all have heard from the one above them. And then the two other things that we must not have are what? It must not have any contradiction to anybody more superior to them. It must not have shudud, or it must not have illa. And illa means hidden defect. That's what we're going to discuss today. Okay. According to the person who the hadith is attributed to, is hadith can either be hadithun what? Marfu' or mawquf or maqtu'. Hadith marfu' refers to something attributed to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. A hadith mawquf is something attributed to a sahabi, and a hadith maqtu' is something attributed to a tabi'i. And then according to the number of narrators, what can you have? The hadith can be divided into which category? Into categories? Is kathura, meaning it's mutawatir, many, meaning more than, like is beyond numbers, or very, very large number. Or it can be mashhur. Mashhur means how many? In each tabaqa, meaning each era, on each chain, what do we have? How many? 3 or more. If it's 2 or more, it becomes aziz. And the last one is, if it's only a single narrator, it becomes what? It's called gharib. And then yesterday we discussed that this gharib is also known as fard. Okay? And this fard is, so gharib means where the tafarrud and the individual, the one person starts from the Prophet ﷺ after him, from the Sahabi's time. Then we said, looking at it from another perspective, if this gharib means one narrator, it's from there or any other one place, then it's called a fard. So the gharib means, we only look at it from this aspect that, look, there's one Sahabi. At least minimum one place becomes one narrator. And if fard is looking at it, well, maybe even after Sahabi is still a fard. Maybe Tabi'i's time is a fard. Maybe the third generation is still a fard. And that's fard mutlaq. Yes? And then nisbi means relative. That, for example, Imam Malik is the only thiqah to narrate it. Or the only person, for the people of Medina have done tafarrud of this, only they narrate it. Or only the people of Kufa narrate it. So things that is gharib, or it's a fard, but it needs to be relative. Okay? Okay. Hadith in terms of the chain being connected or disconnected, or having a break. What types of hadith do we have? Yeah, so if all of the narrators are linked, meaning they have heard from the person above them, this is called hadith muttasil. Okay, that's the chain is unbroken. Then after that, we have a broken chain. So then the chain can say that the breakage or the missing link is either going to be at the end of the chain. What's that going to be called? What's that going to be called if the chain is at the end? It's going to be called a hadithun what? Mursal. If the breakage is at the beginning of the chain, either one or more than one, or the entire chain is missing from the beginning, that's called what? What's it called? mu'allaq. So you have mursal and then we have mu'allaq. And if you have, what's a mu'adhal called? What's a mu'adhal referring to? Ji, Ahmad. Yeah. There are two missing consecutively. Anywhere they're missing, apart from the beginning or beginning. But it's two consecutive. If it's 2 minutes from beginning, you call it a mu'allaq. And if there are two consecutive missing, you call this hadithun mu'adhal. Okay, it's called hadithun mu'adhal. And then what's a mudallas? A mudallas. When a person, gee, go ahead, Ahmed. A person narrates from a sheikh and yeah, yeah. So he narrates from a sheikh who he has heard from, who he has met, but he has not actually heard that particular hadith. Then this is called what? Mudallas. Okay, and that's mudallas, and that's called tadlisul isnad. You also get tadlisul shuyukh when you narrate him with a name which is unknown. Okay. According to Siyaqul Adah, Nuh, what can we have? So the types of, you can have G. You can have a sigha which is sarih fi sama, which are, for example, haddathana, akhbarana, sami'na, G. Or you can have, yeah, you can have a sanad, you can have a narration, a chain, in which is not explicitly mentioned, I've heard. And you have an-ana or an-mu'annan. So an-ana and an-ana, known as mu'annan, hadith mu'annan or hadith mu'annan. So I think I said last time is mu'annan is incorrect. So it is mu'annan, but I think what it done is instead of, if you say mu'annan and mu'annan, the makharij is too similar. So they call mu'annan the an-ana one, and with anna, instead of calling it mu'annan, they call it mu'annan, just to make them separate. Okay. And tell me some uyub of the hadith. We have mubham. Ji. So Abdullah, go ahead. What's a hadithun mubham? Yeah, where the rawi is not named. So if you look at it, hadith mubham and the second type of tadlis are similar. So the second type of tadlis is where you name the sheikh by a name where he's not commonly known. Now, this can happen for two reasons. Either I'm trying to hide him, so it's my fault that I'm trying to hide him, that I don't want you to know his real name because he's not reliable. Or it's your fault, you don't know him, but I know him, everybody knows him, you don't know him. So if you narrate a sheikh by a name, you say rajulun, for example, hadathana rajulun aw shaykhun, that's like proper mubham. But a type of mubham is where you don't know. So that can overlap with the second type of tadlis. Does that make sense? You get it? You get what I'm trying to say? You can have many names, and the name that I'm referring to or referring to him by, you don't know him by that name. But I'm not trying to hide his name, that you don't know that name. So that can be mubham. And mudallis where I'm trying to hide it. The next one, Abdullah. You have shadh and mahfuz. Explain shadh and mahfuz. Yeah, correct. So you have shadh is where a hadith meets all the criteria. The 5 things mentioned for sahih hadith are found. Correct? This the hadith that the rawi is adil, he's got adala, he's got zabt, both first two conditions are met. Then the sanad seems to be muttasil, and there is no, sorry, the first 2 conditions are met. But what happens? There's a shudud, meaning what? Other narrators who are stronger than him, a narrator stronger than him, or many narrators stronger than him, narrate the hadith differently. So it says mukhalafatu thiqa, you're narrating it contrary to a person more reliable than you, or more reliable sources than you. So that hadith, which is the odd one, that's called shadh, and the other hadith or the other ahadith are known as what? What are they known as? Mahfuz. Are you following? Okay. Then who else have a go at this one? You have qalb. You have, is it Ibrahim here? Ibrahim. You have qalb. What does qalb mean? Yeah, you have a qalb means to change. So you can have an isnad you can have a qalb in the isnad. For example, Ibrahim dara Ibrahim. So the first name, last name gets mixed up. Yes? And qalb in the matan. What does qalb in matan refer to? When one of the words is exchanged with another word. The word is swapped around. He has the wrong word. The order of the words or something else is swapped around. So this is what we've reached, and then we have, yeah. Okay. So now we're discussing here illa. So we said illa before is a hidden defect. Without deep knowledge or like insight, you would not be able to suss out what's going on. Okay. So if you have a look at it here, let's do the matan. We just do the text first, and then we'll explain by example. وَمَا بِإِلَّةٍ غُمُوذٍ أَوْ خَفَى. And that hadith, which is with a hidden, a deep, we say here, a deep, or khafa, to hidden. With a deep or hidden illa. So a hadith with a deep or hidden illa, mu'allal. It's called mu'allal indahum qad urifa. According to the hadith. So, وَمَا بِإِلَّةٍ غُمُوذٍ أَوْ خَفَى مُعَلَّلٌ إِنْدَهُمْ قَدْ عُرِفَ. It is known as mu'allal according to them. Urifa, it is known as mu'allal according to the Ahlul Fanni, according to Ahlul Mustalah. The Mustalah al Hadith people narrate this as a hadith in mu'allal. But the bad is called mu'all. This is obviously logo. Is it from Bab If'al? Is it from Bab Taf'il? Is it from Bab, is it Mujarrad? Is it Ma'lul? Hadith Ma'lul? Hadith Mu'allal? Hadith Mu'all? So I think these are all the whole debate in the commentaries. But I think the most sahih is mu'all. But they don't use the word mu'all. Normally say mu'allal or hadith bi'illah. Is it even ma'lul as well? You get the point. Okay. So mu'allal. Now let's look at an example here. So قال صلى الله عليه وسلم, the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم says in a hadith, من جلس في مجلس كثر لغته فقال قبل أن يقوم. You sit in a gathering, and in that gathering we just say different things, we joke, mess around, laugh. You said all here and there, like apart from dhikrullah and tasbih, etc. So then what do you do? Kafar, it's another kafar of the majlis. So you say Subhanakallah, Subhanaka Rabbana Rabbi Hamdik, La ilaha illa ant astaghfiruka thumma atubu ilayk. If you say this, then what happens? All the small little here and there things that we said in the majlis, Allah will forgive them. Now remember, this hadith means this wording with this chain, yes? Okay? So this is the matan of the hadith. If you look at the chain, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he's telling us, and from him, Abu Hurairah radiyallahu ta'ala anhu is narrating. And from him, we have the narrator Abu Salih. From Abu Salih, his son, Suhail narrates, Suhail ibn Abi Salih. From him, his student, Musa ibn Aqaba. Who's the narrator? Musa ibn Aqaba. From him, we have Ibn Jurayj. From him, we have Hajjaj. And from him, Imam Tirmidhi and Imam Ahmad, they both narrate his hadith. Yes, you got the chain? Now, if you look at this chain, we don't know these, like we don't know Abu Hurairah, we know Rasulullah, we know Tirmidhi, we know Ahmad. Hajjaj, we know him, he's narrated. Ibn Jurayj came before, that he's thiqah. And the others, we don't really know, like we'll get familiar with them as we go over them more, but we don't know. But we will say here, when we look in the books, the apparent is what? That is a thiqah. Like this is sahih hadith, because the apparent, when we look at it apparently, all of the narrators are thiqah, and they all have dhabt, and there is no missing chain in between. So if a person has looked at it and he doesn't know the different problems or different things behind the scene issues, he may think this is hadith sahih. Okay. Now, this hadith, what kind of hadith is it in terms of the man udhifa ilay? Why is hadith? It's hadith marfu. Why? Because it's attributed to Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Correct? Now, if you look at it, Auf ibn Abdullah ibn Utbah ibn Mas'ud, he narrates hadith. From him, Suhail ibn Amr also narrates. Suhail ibn Abi Salih. Suhail ibn Abi Salih. Okay? And Wahib ibn Khalid, he also narrates it. And from him, Musa ibn Ismail al-Manqari, he also narrates it. But when he narrates it, he doesn't mention Abu Huraira or doesn't mention Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Who does he mention it as? A saying of Auf ibn Abdullah ibn Utbah ibn Mas'ud. So this is now, and he doesn't even say Rasulullah said. If he said Rasulullah said, that would be hadith mursal, because the sahabi is missing. Is mentioned as the way he's mentioned as his own quote. Are you following? So in both of them, both Musa ibn Aqaba and Wahib ibn Khalid, both of them are narrating from their teacher Suhail ibn Abi Saleh. Now, in one narration, it goes to say that Abu Huraira is saying, and the other narration, it goes to say that Auf is saying, and Auf is saying, but he doesn't say Rasulullah said, Abu Huraira said. He just says, without the chain. Now, if you look at Ibn Jurayj al-Thiqa, but the problem here is, if you look at it, so now, you might think, well, Ibn Jurayj al-Thiqa, so then, but if you look at it here, Imam Bukhari rahmatullah alayhi, what does he say? He says, لا نذكر لموسى سماء من سهيل. Because something went wrong here. Because from our historical records and all the preservations we have many hadith. And Musa ibn Aqaba, apart from this one hadith, doesn't say any hadith from him. This is the only time we've got any record of Musa ibn Aqaba narrating from Suhail ibn Abi Saleh. Yes? Are you following me? So Imam Bukhari is saying, I doubt that Musa ibn Aqaba heard, because if he heard a hadith from him, he would have heard more hadith. And Imam Bukhari is like, we do not know of any time where Musa ibn Aqaba has heard from Suhail ibn Abi Saleh. Which means that even though this top hadith seems to be what? Sahih. It has an illa defect. Yes, Musa ibn Aqaba could have heard from Suhail ibn Abi Saleh. However, it's not as such. Why? Because Imam Bukhari is saying that Musa ibn Aqaba, his sama', he has not heard from him. So there's something missing from here. So this hadith at the top is what? What's hadith going to be called? Hadith Mu'al. And this is a very deep science. It needs a lot of information, a lot of records. And let's say how this is like this whole, you have books and books called Ilmul Ilal. Or you have like many books of Kitabul Ilal. Imam Tirmidhi's got a book in Kitab, he got Ilal Kabir, Ilal Saghir. Ibn Abi Hatim al-Razi's got like books, many books on its Ilal. And it's also called Su'alat, where people ask different mashayikh and muhaddithun questions. Now, what about this one? You know what happened here? And they will mention different points. So it's not just simply like searching date of birth, date of death, thiqah, not thiqah, and that's it, it's sahih. We have to say, well, there's much more information, like things that we will not know of. So Musa ibn Aqaba, he was born at a time where he could have heard from Suhail ibn Abi Saleh, but if you don't know Imam Bukhari's statement here, you might get saying, well, Musa ibn Aqaba, he could have met Suhail ibn Abi Saleh, so therefore, you might think it's a thiqah, this is the sahih hadith, the top one. And Imam Tirmidhi, Imam Ahmad brought this, but he says that no, really, it's not. Imam Bukhari's opinion is towards the bottom one, that he has not heard from him, so therefore, the bottom hadith is more reliable. Yes? So a little note here. So now we should stop putting the hadith. We should stop doing Amal upon the hadith. Should we? سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك ونشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت ونستغفرك ونتوب إليك. Should we stop it? Don't do it anymore. Make a video refuting all those people who say this. I say you guys are unaware of hadith is da'if. We should not do Amal upon this hadith. No? A student of knowledge will say, well, this is we know regarding this one chain and this one matan, but there's so much more knowledge out there. Is it narrated from other Sahaba? Are there other chains? So don't just jump to a conclusion, isti'jal, that because this one chain is weak or this one chain has a defect, that means that the whole matan. Because remember, you might have a. Remember we said a hadith is one sanad and one matan. So this sanad is weak, but the matan may have another sanad. So that hadith is sahih. Or you may have another matan with similar wording. Or you may have another chain from Abu Huraira, not from via Abu Saleh, or via Abu Saleh without Suhail ibn Abi Saleh. So you can have different variations. So this one sanad with this matan, this has an illah. Don't just jump to the conclusion that this whole hadith is ghayr ma'mul. There may be other narrations. There may be other Sahaba narrating it. So you have to, it's not, so in ilm, al-talib ilm, you don't just jump to what the first thing you come to know of. You do ta'anni, meaning you have to be. So we don't know, so that's why you just don't look at, open a book of takhrij and say, well, hadith da'if. You have to look at many other aspects. There may be other Even terms that we haven't even studied yet. Sahih li ghayri, Hasan li ghayrihi, Sahih li ghayri, etc., etc. So you have to ta'anni and just, this is all we know. Be humble in your knowledge. Okay. So that is what we've done today. We've done hadith mu'al, and hadith mu'al is a hadith which seems on the outset, on the apparent, that it is sahih. There's no problem with it, but within it there's a hidden defect, and just by knowing dates of birth or death, we're not able to find out. So we have all of this. We went through all of it already. And the last thing we've done here now, we have the uyub of the hadith, and you have mubham, we have a shadh mahfuz, we have qalb of isnad or qalb of matan, and hadith can have an illah. And illah is just a whole science itself. You have to then read up all the books of ilal and understand, comparing hadith, different narrations, and that's when you start finding out the illah that may exist within a particular hadith. Everyone following? Okay, go ahead. You see, when again, even mubham, where is the mubham? I didn't do this, I want to keep it very simple to you, but this as a, I guess, end of class note, is that we have a mubham narrator. We have mubham. So let's say, for example, the mubham is a narrator. If the mubham is a narrator, then that will put a question mark on the hadith. What if the mubham is within the sanad? What if the mubham is within the hadith itself, the matan itself? That anna rajulan sa'ala an-nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Abu Hurairah said, a man asked Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Does this mubham cause a problem? This one will cause a problem because this is within the sanad, matan. That's we know the sanad. And then you can also have a scenario where, so a mubham, if you have a mubham, the way in a chain, usually, again, it's all, you have like a many other, so on the basic principles, yes, a mubham should be da'if. But there are scenarios where a mubham can be you could have one hadith a mubham, but then there's many other chains with the same matan. So that would reinforce what the chain of the mubham narrator is saying. So it's not just, you have to look at it in more detail. But on the face value, simple rule is yes, if it's mubham, it's da'if. But that one chain with that one matan is da'if. Not the entire text and other chains with other wording or the similar wording. You get what I'm trying to say? Yes? Any other questions? Okay, subhanallah wa bihamdi subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika wa nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta wa nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk.